Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of Welcome to my first video for holiday theme book reviews. And the reason why I say holiday theme is because although I will be focusing on Christmas themed ghost stories this year, I'm not opposed to researching and finding other cultures that might celebrate during the same month of December. And so for that reason, or if I've read a book that covers multiple holidays from like October through December, it's just easier to sum it up as holiday themed book reviews. Now, I have been away for about 3 weeks, and that's because I got married, I had a honeymoon, and also Thanksgiving happened, so it was pretty hectic during that time. And I really did miss connecting with the book community, especially the horror book community, so for that reason, it's great to be back. Now, while I was away on my honeymoon, I did have some really cool opportunities to load in on some books. I ended up going to Falk, Arkansas, where The Legend of Boggy Creek was filmed, and I went to the Monster Mart, where I loaded up on some nonfiction books about Bigfoot. And also, I discovered my very first second in Charles that I was able just to spend the entire day in. And while I was there, I loaded up on some great horror books, so totally expect some reviews in the near future from those.
Surprise!
Oh, thank you. Can I have it now?
Yeah.
Oh, well, sometimes we give each other gifts early throughout the month of December. So let's see what this is.
What's wrong?
Fried green tomatoes from the Whistle Stop Cafe.
You're welcome.
I'm just gonna use my cup of good cheer for a minute. Alright, well, let's see what else we have. Jackie Collins. This is a joke, isn't it? I'm gonna get to a rare book that's at the bottom of this, and it's just gonna make it all better. I know it is.
Keep digging.
Danielle Steele. Alright, there's one more. John Grisham. I'm gonna be grateful. It's Christmas. I'm gonna find my inner peace. What the hell do you think you're doing getting me this crap? This channel isn't some old spinster wanting 50 cats. This is for people who want sex and death. What the fuck? What kind of sick perverts read that trash? Can't you see I'm just trying to enjoy a cup of good cheer? When I was a kid, and this is when VHS was popular, the highlight of my week was to go to the video rental store with my mom, where she would let me rent any horror movie of my choice on a Friday night, and I would watch it throughout the weekend over and over. And it was during this time that I discovered the movie Ghost Story, which after viewing it just one time became one of my immediate favorites that I would gravitate to throughout the months of December and January. And I think it was mainly because of the gloomy, cold setting that it provided. It really complemented the season, in my opinion. But it wouldn't be until years later when I was in junior high that I discovered the movie was based off of the book by the same title by Peter Straub. And even though I wanted to read the book at that time, a lot of older readers really prevented me from doing so because they said the book was boring, it went nowhere, it just didn't click with them, and I did not want to invest my time in something that would feel like a chore to read. So I dismissed the book and continued my years watching the movie every time December and January would roll around. And even though I did this, the book continued to land in my hands one way or another. And each time it did so, I would have the interest of wanting to read it, but at the same time, I just felt like there were better things to read, so I would put it back on the shelf. Well, this last year, after October came and went, I decided to finally give the book a chance. And by the way, not only was this the first time I read Ghost Story, but it was the first time I read Straub. And what I discovered was I had really neglected myself over the years from reading a frightening book. And the thing is, between the movie and the movie doesn't even touch the book with a 10-foot pole, because the movie only focuses on one aspect, where the book just has this wide range of nothing but thrills and chills, and there was actually a few scenes that gave me the willies. And because of what all goes down in the book, this is now one of my top 3 favorite scariest books ever. The version of Ghost Story I have has an awesome introduction by Stephen King at the beginning of it, and it really gave me the insight that I was hoping for so I could work on the next section of this video. But for now, I just want to let you know that with Ghost Story, if you're the kind of person who likes to align what you're reading with a specific time of year or holiday, this book starts around the end of October and goes all the way through December and into the new year. So starting this around the end of October or early November, that would be an appropriate time to start reading this for the holiday season. Now, with Ghost Story, we have a group of men that are the main focus, and they're called the Chowder Society, which they've been friends for about the last 50 years or so, and they've kind of gone into this routine of every week they will gather at one another's house with whiskey and cigars, and they'll sit around and tell ghost stories. And even though one might think that this is just for their entertainment, it turns out that these stories are actually a means for them to cope with the past, and it actually becomes cathartic for them after a while. Now, with the Chowder Society, you do have 4 men at this time, but there had been 5 men, and the 5th man's name was Edward Wanderley. Well, about a year ago, you had where one of the Chowder Society men named John Jaffrey threw this party for an actress, and Edward had gone off with the actress to hobnob, and after him being away for about an hour or so, they discover that he died. And the actress he was hobnobbing with was nowhere to be seen. But because of how he died, his death was really just written off as a natural cause. But now that the year anniversary is approaching, the Chowder Society is really starting to question, was his death really a natural cause? So they're talking amongst themselves, and Sears is the one who decides to write Edward's nephew, who is named Don. And by the way, Don is a horror author, and it just so happens that the books that he writes kind of deals with the subject matter that the Chowder Society is going through. So they're hoping that if they contact Don, Don will be able to shine some light on Edward's death. So the way they plan this is Sears ends up writing Don and explains to him that he needs to come and see the house that he inherited upon his uncle's death. And so, of course, Don decides to accept, and he goes from his California residency all the way over to Milburn, which is like from West Coast to East Coast. And by the way, this is a fictional town, but it is set in the New England area. And once Don arrives, he discovers that one of the Chowder Society men named John Jaffrey has actually committed suicide 10 days prior by jumping off of a bridge. And while this suicide has really baffled all of the town, the story becomes more and more complex from here, because as Don starts taking over the plot line, we are introduced to a lot of like livestock mutilations that feel like it's extraterrestrial. We also have a ton of homicides. We have a lot of supernatural elements that come to be, like the dead coming back to life. And also the main focus is an ancient evil that is way beyond the typical vengeful ghost. And what's even scarier for Don is he realizes this is not the first time he has confronted this malevolent force. Unlike the movie, the book's antagonist is a shapeshifter and not just a vengeful ghost. In its text, the novel states these shifters are tricksters, and because of their vanity and wanting to be seen, their schemes can be elaborate and can take decades before their plans unfold. Upon researching shapeshifters, it seems every culture has its own lore regarding these creatures, and these aren't just limited to werewolves and cat people. Some shifters are able to turn into birds, fish, reptiles, and so on. And where most shapeshifters are believed to be tricksters or bloodthirsty things who are looking to wreak havoc, quite a few are actually harmless. A good example of the friendly shapeshifter is the Selkie of Celtic folklore. For those who don't know what a Selkie is, these are seals that take off their skin to become more human. They are described as helpful creatures who look over fishermen. Although I would love to list off all of the many shifters and their qualities and origins here, doing so would take hours upon hours. So just know if you decide to research the subject, it is a literal rabbit hole. Aside from what types of shifters are believed to exist, it appears that shape-shifting could date back to 13,000 BC, where possible drawings of shape-shifting were found in a French cave known as the Cave of the Tuere Frius. An example of this is the sketch known as The Sorcerer, and if we want to consider gods and goddesses into the mix, shape-shifting can be found in ancient Greek and Roman mythology. But if we consider Christianity, the serpent in the Garden of Eden could be the first shapeshifter to ever exist. Fun facts. I went to the internet to try to find information on what inspired Peter Straub to write Ghost Story, and even though I found a lot of really great interviews, there was just really nothing much that I could grab from in regards to this specific work. So I decided to go to the introduction section of this edition, and with what Stephen King provided, it really gave all of the insight I needed. And since this edition is out of print, I'll just give a little rundown of what inspired Peter Straub to write Ghost Story. Straub admitted Ghost Story started as a result of him having read all of the American supernatural fiction he could find, which included Nathaniel Hawthorne and Henry James. But he also admits he read a lot of European ghost stories as well, such as Ambrose Bierce and Edith Wharton. After learning this, it is obvious two of his protagonists, who were named Ricky Hawthorne and Sears James, have the surnames that nod to these classic authors. Also, when beginning his plotting process, Straub noted the first thought that came to mind was a setting where old men gathered to tell ghost stories, but he needed a link to connect them all. And among the Chowder Society stories, their retellings are variations of classic works like My Kingsman and Turn of the Screw. Finally, Straub previously noted the format of Salem's Lot helped him with the layout of Ghost Story, as he wanted to present his vision on a larger canvas, much like the Stephen King classic. Now that we have that covered, it's time to move on to the spoiler section of this video, which this is going to be where I elaborate on some scenes and character development that really impressed me or stood out. So if this is something that you do not wish to hear because you've not read the book, then you might want to skip this section because it could ruin the experience for you. Now, to make this easy, if you were to scroll down to the comment section of this video, you'll see that I have a pinned comment, and that will allow you a timestamp so you can click on that and avoid the spoilers section. You only have 17 seconds to do this, so ready, set, go! My damn! There are so many creepy scenes in this book, it is hard to just narrow it down to just 2 or 3 moments I want to talk about, so this is going to come off sounding more like a synopsis. So you kind of have to forgive me for that. But the first subject I want to touch on is the subject of Finney and Gregory Bates, which they are some of the most important characters in this book. And they come about through a story that is told to the Chowder Society by Sears. Now, with Sears' story, he's reflecting on a time when he was a teacher, maybe in the late 30s, early 40s, and he has two kids in his class who are siblings named Finney and Constance. Now, Finney is mentally handicapped, which could be why it's easier for him to be manipulated. But as he is becoming more interested in these siblings because he wants to help them out because they're poverty stricken, they don't have a guardian to look over them, he really becomes interested in their well-being. Well, the more he becomes interested in their well-being, the more he discovers that they are in fact taken care of by an older sibling named Gregory. But it just so happens that Gregory is a malevolent character and he is also dead. So what goes on in this story reminds me a lot of the book The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. And I say that because you have the Sears character who is equivalent to the governess in that book, and the Bates children who is equivalent to the children that the governess looked after. And very similar to The Turn of the Screw, you have where Finney dies because of his older dead brother. And even though I thought that Sears was telling this story just to come to terms with the past, or as the book constantly asked its reader, what's the worst thing you've ever done, I considered maybe Sears was thinking this was the worst thing he had ever did, which was to allow a child to die. But in actuality, Sears did everything he possibly could to save Finney, but it was just out of his power. Now, the thing is, with Sears and Finney, they continue to pop up throughout the story, and they're pretty important characters to the shapeshifter known as Eva. And with Gregory, he becomes like this werewolf kind of shapeshifter monstrosity, where Finney remains kind of looking in human form, but Straub describes him as having the face of misery. And with that being such an open description, I already have in my mind, okay, there's a dead kid with the face of misery. That's some pretty creepy imagery in my opinion. But one of the moments, and well, it's actually multiple moments, that really just got to me is Finney is a peeping Tom. And there are tons of instances in this book where you have characters who are just minding their own damn business, and all of a sudden they look out the window and there is dead little Finney glaring in at them with this malicious glee on his face. And that just creeped me the hell out. It truly did. Now, one moment that I found to be very interesting and also kind of ironic is the scene where the town preacher locks himself inside of the church because Finney has been looking in through the windows at him, and the preacher mistakes Finney as being the child version of Christ, and this really frightens the preacher. Now, my thing is, if you're a preacher, why are you afraid of Christ? And also, why are you going to lock yourself in a church to avoid the child version of Christ? It kind of makes me wonder that maybe this preacher did a lot of underhanded crap and he's really trying to repent before he has to meet his maker. So that was really interesting, and it's really never elaborated on exactly what the preacher did to be afraid of what he would think would be Christ. Now, aside from the siblings and the creep factors of this book, there is a really kick-ass moment. And this is when you have the characters of Ricky, Dawn, and Peter who come together, who finally decide to hand Eva, Greg, and Finney their ass. And because of a cryptic message that the three come across, they believe they know where the shapeshifters are hiding out, which is the town theater. And just so happens, the town theater has been playing on a loop Night of the Living Dead, which is kind of an odd comment in regards to what's going on in the town. So you have the three of them who go to the theater, and they're armed with an axe, a butcher's knife, and a bowie knife. And when they get into the theater, they find Gregory and Finney, but Eva is nowhere around. So, of course, as you expect, a showdown happens between the two shapeshifters and the three guys. And by the way, if you've ever wondered how badass a geriatric, a middle-aged man, and a teenager can be together, this scene really lays it out. And truth be it, they can be total badasses. So you have where you think that a simple killing would get rid of these shapeshifters. No. This is the moment where Straub really shines with his ability to be grotesque. And he does it with such poise that it brings you to the edge, but it doesn't push you over the edge. Because the thing is, with Peter, Don, and Ricky, they actually have to mince these bastards up into mush, because simply just stabbing them or cutting their head off, it ain't getting the job done. So the scene is pretty gross, and it is totally badass. It's one of my favorite scenes in the book. Now, another subject I want to touch on is the moment where the town of Milburn literally goes apeshit during December. And during December, I don't mean they go apeshit by like hanging Christmas lights or decorations. Who knows? Maybe they did. That part's not elaborated on. But what I mean by them going apeshit is you have a blizzard, snowstorm, ice storm, winter storm, whatever the hell you want to call it. You have a winter storm that goes down, and it causes all of Milburn to go under siege for what would be just about the entire month. And in this time, you have where supplies have been cut off, electricity goes out, tensions are running high, and also you have the evils of the town being the shapeshifters that are starting to bear down on the community. So you have abusive situations going on where you have spouses beating each other. You have 10 people who have died. And to top it off, you have people who are starting to suffer from hallucinations brought on by the shapeshifters. Now, one moment that really creeped me out was where the town sheriff was sitting at the jail, and one of the cells had been used to store dead bodies because they had run out of space. And while he's sitting there by himself, he starts hearing sounds come from the cell where the dead bodies are. And once he goes to investigate, he sees that the dead bodies are becoming reanimated. And the way that it's painted, it's just creepy, totally creepy as hell. And another subject that was really a kick in the balls in regards to what goes on during this time is there's a scene where a family man is at home on Christmas Eve with his wife and children. And he is visited by the shapeshifters. And the shapeshifters influence him to kill his wife and kids, which he does. And then to top it off, he sits under the Christmas tree and blows his brains out. Total kick in the balls moment. And with these scenes, it really shows that Straub has the ability to be suspenseful, creepy, grotesque, and also throw a few punches at the same time. What I want to touch on is the amount of people who bitch about the Chowder Society not doing anything when they are confronted with supernatural forces. Well, what the hell do you expect them to do? By the time these men realize they are being confronted with a supernatural force, they're too old to be able to do anything on their own. I mean, hell, they're just hoping at the end of the day to get to another cup of prune juice and a Werther's Original and then to tell a scary story. That's it. Now, because of their age and what they're going through and everything, the evil powers of this town do have an upper hand over them because they're not as young as what they used to be. But regardless, this Bros Before Hoes club of yesteryear are still pretty badass, especially Ricky, which at the beginning of the book, Ricky comes across as like this pushover who's just really timid and everything. But in all honesty, when push comes to shove, Ricky is a true OG. He's a badass. Now, as we're talking about badasses, another character I want to touch on is Peter. This kid, Lord, heaven forbid if someone screws with anyone else in his life that he cares for, because with the lengths that he goes to avenge his mother's death and his friend's death, it is badass. He is in the thought process of, if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me. And these are with evil entities that are ancient. Imagine what in the hell he would do to a guy. I mean, hey, if you screw with him, you get what you deserve. Just saying. Now, the final character I want to touch on is going to be Don Wanderley, and he is a total badass. I mean, the thing is, he goes through all kind of shit. He even has sex with the Eva shapeshifter and lives to tell about it. And the thing is, he actually gets the lead shapeshifter in his hand, which is the lead shapeshifter. Its name is Dr. Rabbitfoot, or that's at least what Don calls him. And Dr. Rabbitfoot transforms into a wasp at the end of the book, and Don has him in his hand, and he takes the Bowie knife and saws. It just... Oh, it's cringeworthy. It's almost as cringeworthy as that scene in Gerald's Game when that bitch pulled out of the handcuff. But anyway, Don saws into Dr. Rabbitfoot as he's holding him, which means he's sawing into the meat of his hand. And life just continues. Just as good as could be after the bastard goes down. And Don, he is just not having the shit no more. And when he saws into that, it's just one determination: kill Dr. Rabbitfoot. And after that, he's just, yeah, today's a good day. In all honesty, I believe Don Wanderley is deserving of a theme song. Maybe something like, Don Wanderley is a super badass. Yeah, something like that. Sorry, I can't sing worth a shit. I'm total white boy. One of the many things that I love about this book is the amount of depth that Straub gives his shapeshifters. And by what I mean with this is you have Dr. Rabbitfoot, Eva Galley, Greg, and Finney Bates, and they are described as the entities behind every ghost story ever created. And this includes werewolf stories, vampire stories, so on and so forth. These are the ancient evils that have started it all. And so I really like that idea. And another thing that I really have to applaud Straub on is the aliases that he gives to Eva Galley, which aside from her original name, Eva Galley, all of her aliases have the initials of AM, which spell out the word am. And this is really a reference to the beginning of the book where Dawn asks a variation of the Eva shapeshifter, "What are you?" And she replies, "I am you." So that was pretty awesome. Now, the next thing that comes into play is when the book asks, what is the worst thing you have ever done? And the book asks this very frequently. It comes up again and again, and it's spoken in dialogue, it's spoken in thought. And the way that this happens is it feels like the book is breaking a fourth wall to try to get the reader to confess to something. And it makes sense that it would do this because in a way it kind of makes the book feel like it's a shapeshifter as well. And the reason why I say that is because throughout you have the shapeshifters who are trying to corrupt, and they live off of corruption. So it would only make sense that it would want you to confess something that you've done that was a corruptible moment in your life. And with the Eva Galley character, what she does is she tries to corrupt the Chowder Society through sex, because when they first encounter her, they're all virgins. And even though she fails at doing that, she still corrupts them because they end up accidentally killing her and then they cover up her death. And so their corruption actually comes in at the cover-up. And what follows this is the aftermath of how that moment has affected each one of the men's lives. Some ongoing themes that are in the book The first one, of course, is corruption, which I just covered that. The second one is going to be on vengeance, because you do have the Eva Galley character who is wanting to avenge her death, but at the same time, you have the Chowder Society who's wanting to avenge themselves. You have Don who is wanting to avenge his family, and you have Peter who wants to avenge his mother and his friend. And so a lot of times with ghost stories, it's really just a one-way street of vengeance. You have a spirit that has been wronged, and you really tend to feel sorry for that spirit a lot of times. And so the spirit has returned to exact its revenge. But with this, revenge is a two-way street, and that makes the plot so much more complex. Essentially, this is a gothic horror novel, and the reason why I say that is because it has ghosts, it has a haunted house, it has vampires, it has werewolves, it's set in a gloomy, cold setting, and there's even madness, and the madness that comes about is the madness that is influenced by the shapeshifters on human beings. And it even has a dangerous romance. And to top it off, there's even one scene where Don Wanderley notes in his journal that he is the Chowder Society's version of Van Helsing. Now, aside from this being an awesome gothic horror novel, it is very well constructed with its writing. The sentence structure is it's easy and simple to read. The pacing is good, and the character development is superb, which, if you remember from some of the other videos I did in the past, the main hang-up I had was based on the character development. And this book is how character development should be done, or at least in my opinion, it's how it should be done. So I highly recommend this book to readers. And even though I had never read Straub before, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this is a really good first book to read by Straub, because it really shows off his talents for being creepy, it shows off his talents for being dramatic, suspenseful, and even a little grotesque. So if you've never read him before, I would totally start with this book. Now, on to the questions. The first question I have is, what would be a good follow-up book to read after Ghost Story? Now, these are books that I would prefer to be Peter Straub books. At the moment, I do have Julia and Coco in my library, so if one of those would be a good follow-up to read, that's awesome. I already have them in my hands. But if there's another title that you would suggest over those as a follow-up to Ghost Story, just please let me know, and I'm sure I can grab it at my library or get it on Audible, one of the two. So if you don't mind, just comment that in the comment section, and I will take your recommendations into consideration. The second question I have is, since the book really focuses on a creepy house that people would cross the street to avoid, what is a circumstance where you encountered a creepy house that made you cross the street? Personally, for myself, there is only one circumstance I can think of, maybe two, but there's just one that immediately comes to mind. The circumstance was when I used to do paranormal investigations, and we had investigated a location a few times, which I'm not going to name the location because it's still an operating location and I don't want to upset the business owners, but we had investigated it a few times, and the last time we investigated it, we were in the chapel area of that location, which it used to be a garage where a man had killed himself, and also surrounding that garage, they had found body parts belonging to Civil War soldiers. So it had some negativity seeped in there, and I do believe there are multiple kinds of spirits at this location. And for the first few times we investigated it, I believe we connected with the human spirits. But the last time we investigated was inside of the chapel, and we did an EVP where a voice answered, and it was just this guttural, animalistic voice. It did not sound human whatsoever. I don't think it was ever human. And the thing is, it said to get out, which I know that sounds very Amityville and very cliche, but it is what it said. And also at the same time, we had people who were with us who started to get migraines and started to feel nauseated. But as soon as they were removed from the property, everything went back to normal. So I take these as warning signs of places to stay away from. And even today, when I come near that house, I'll do everything within my power to stay as far away from that property as I can. And even if someone were to say, hey, let's go check this out. Okay, you know what? I'm going to park my car across the street. You can step out, take a few pictures of whatever, but I'm not going back on that property. I've done it, and I don't care to do it again. And my thing is, I don't mind dealing with ghosts. I can deal with ghosts all day, all night. That's fine and dandy, but there is no way in hell I'm going to be dealing with the demonic. And I think that's exactly what that was. So that's my story, and I look forward to seeing yours in the comments. Now, it is time to move on to the end of the video, where I thank Joseph Baylott for contributing to my Patreon account. If you would like to contribute as well, as a thank you, I'll mention your name at the end of upcoming videos. And also, if you are unable to contribute, no sweat. There's no guilt that I want to put on you to contribute, because this is just for fun. And if you are able to contribute, awesome, cool deal. But if you can't, no sweat. All I hope you do is just return to my channel, enjoy some videos, and just have fun. That's all I'm asking. And so the Patreon is there. If you can or can't contribute, that's cool, whatever. We do have also in the description section where you can connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So those links are available in the description section as well. And also, if you have not subscribed to my channel yet, be sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell so you won't miss future videos. And until next time, I hope everyone has a great week and sweet nightmares.